Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israeli leadership extends a hand to the Palestinian Authority in hopes they'll reconsider their refusals to negotiate ahead of annexations. Thousands of Israelis erupt in protest against corruption and arrests outside Prime Minister Netanyahu's official residence in Jerusalem, and the Israeli government meets to weigh renewed public restrictions as coronavirus infections spike to over 600 per day. Still holding out for a diplomatic solution, Israel is again reaching out to the Palestinian leadership, calling on them to come to the negotiating table now, ahead of unilateral plans for Israeli annexations in Judea and Samaria. The door is open to talk immediately if the Palestinians will just walk through it. Alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz extending the diplomacy hand again ahead of Israel's plans to move on annexing parts of Judea and Samaria next month. Taking to Twitter, Gantz lamenting the years-long unwillingness of the Palestinians to negotiate with Israel over a peace plan. The defense minister saying that he would sit down with Ramallah immediately if they're willing to talk seriously. While the Palestinians have rejected the U.S. peace plan out of hand, President Donald Trump's Middle East peace team has not yet announced whether it would back Israel moving forward with it unilaterally. Under the plan, 30% of Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, is designated for Israel, and 70% would remain for a prospective Palestinian state. Via Jordan's King Abdullah, Israel reportedly conveyed a message to PA President Mahmoud Abbas that its expansion plans have been greatly reduced, bringing the focus to Ma'ale Adumim, the Etzion Bloc, and Ariel. The message is that annexations will no longer apply to the Jordan Valley. Instead, they'll be limited to 2 or 3 settlement blocks. But in Gaza, these are the scenes unfolding over the weekend. Thousands taking to the streets demonstrating against the plan Friday. While in the West Bank city of Hebron too, Palestinians throwing rocks at security patrols in the area. Gantz, for his part, reiterating his conditions for the move, saying that areas with large numbers of Palestinians will not be touched, and that Israel will grant equal rights to Palestinians living in annexed areas. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Palestinians in these areas would not get Israeli citizenship. July 1 is the earliest possible date that Netanyahu can begin to act under his coalition deal with Benny Gantz. So just 3 days left before Israel's planned push towards annexations in Judea and Samaria. And joining us with more about it is Jerusalem Bureau Chief from the Jewish News Syndicate, Alex Trainin. Alex, thank you so much for being here with us. Now, there's still a lot of silence and secrecy about the deal. Is that, is this a sign of last-minute changes, or maybe evidence that Netanyahu might even push the deal beyond that date?
Well, it's certain that even within his own coalition, there are challenges to the full implementation of sovereignty. And I think that it is possible that it may not go forward in the fullest extent possible. However, I do think that that is what the Prime Minister is hoping to accomplish, to apply all of Israeli sovereignty over the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, as well as the Jordan Valley.
Beyond the 30%?
No, in the 30% of the 30% of the Judea and Samaria, which is about 50% of Area C, which is the area which all the Jewish communities are currently inside. So
wait, now you mentioned the Jordan Valley as well, which of course we understand from certain leaks from Jordanian King Abdullah II that he's saying Israel isn't really going to go into the Jordan Valley, at least not now. Is there maybe some difference of opinion, or maybe the government's not on the same page?
I think there's a lot of elements here that are trying to stymie the implementation of Israeli sovereignty, and with that, there are leaks to the press, some of which make it seem as if there is pressure that maybe does or does not exist. I've heard from sources within the Prime Minister's office that the reports about that specific report not being true, that in fact the Prime Minister's office still does intend to go ahead with sovereignty as it was laid out.
All right. Now, in the meantime, another Israeli mayor is now coming out against the planned annexations because it would absorb Ma'ale Adumim into Jerusalem. Why do you think that that's necessarily a bad thing?
Well, that's like a sort of secondary issue, which is if we do apply sovereignty over, let's say, a large community like Ma'ale Adumim, which is about 10 minutes outside of Jerusalem, the question is whether or not to include that within the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem. That's really a secondary issue, and that can be addressed after the fact. It doesn't necessarily apply to the application of sovereignty.
So what about the primary issues that a lot of these settlement heads are still expressing? Are those being addressed?
Well, the reason why settlement heads are actually against the application of sovereignty is because that application is linked up to the Trump administration's peace to prosperity vision, which actually lays out the pathway towards the creation of a Palestinian state.
Sure.
And many of the settler leaders don't want to see any Palestinian state created. So therefore, they don't want any first step of a plan that might lead towards a Palestinian state.
All right, now what about another common issue that some of the settlement heads are expressing is not even just the settlement heads, but the security issue, that the new borders drawn around this expanded Israel would be difficult, if not impossible, to adequately protect.
Well, I think the very important thing about this implementation of sovereignty is that not one Palestinian nor one Israeli moves from their homes. Mm-hmm. In fact, even the Trump administration's vision is to sort of canonize the conflict and end the conflict where it is, meaning that Palestinians stay where they are and Jews stay where they are. And Israel is supposed to get full security control, even in the full implementation of the Trump's peace to prosperity vision over all of Judea and Samaria. So actually, it will be easier for Israel to maintain security in the region.
Interesting. All right. Now, the United Kingdom, I kind of want to shift our focus a little bit. The UK is joining in the chorus with a lot of EU leaders, the Labour Party specifically in the UK, saying that if Israel goes through with this plan, they're going to boycott settlement goods. You know, how likely is that boycott actually to come to fruition? Well,
Israel's been fighting against a growing boycott sentiment and movement over the past several years, and they've actually made significant gains to prevent the implementation of further boycotting. And I think that the diplomatic community, even in Europe, understands that boycotting Israeli products is not productive for peace, especially the UK, which is now leaving the European Union and is looking for trade partners. And Britain and Israel are very strong trade partners, and I don't think that it will be in Britain's best interest to sort of implement any boycotts against Israeli products.
All right, now my final question, I want to bring the focus back to the United States, because we're talking about how this is the Trump peace plan, but the White House is still pretty quiet about whether or not they're actually supporting Israel's push to unilaterally annex. You know, what do you think their final decision is going to be here? I
think they've been very, very clear that they're in favor of this. I mean, Mike Pompeo made his statement known now as the Pompeo Doctrine, which says that the United States no longer views settlements as being illegal under international law. Mm-hmm. Prime Minister Netanyahu made a very dramatic announcement prior to going to Washington for the press conference together with the president, where he already stated his intention to apply sovereignty over the Jordan Valley. I think the U.S. administration and the Israeli administration are working hand in hand on this, and the two are working completely together and not one against the other.
All right, well, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. We only have a few days to go before the deadline hits. Alex, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much.
All right, now back in Jerusalem, and in spite of social distancing orders, thousands gathered over the weekend to protest government corruption and arrests. Danny Menken has the story.
The Black Flag demonstrations continue, protesting against corruption and pointing the finger at the Israeli Prime Minister. Thousands of people demonstrating overnight outside Benjamin Netanyahu's residence, one day after several protesters were arrested in a similar demonstration against the premier. The anti-corruption movement sparking debate, with protesters holding signs calling Netanyahu a crime minister over his indictment on corruption charges, and calling for the release of a former Israeli Air Force Brigadier General, Amir Haskel, among those arrested in those Friday protests. Defense Minister Benny Gantz also taking to social media in support of the public's right to demonstrate, after police sought restraining orders against Haskel and his fellow protesters to ban them from Jerusalem for at least 15 days. But these scenes are allowed by law, and at a late-night hearing that stretched beyond midnight Saturday, a Jerusalem magistrate court judge ordering the detained ralliers' release, saying that banning them from Jerusalem would amount to a muzzle on free speech.
Seemingly more and more Israelis are taking advantage of the summer sun, taking in life from their favorite coastlines, bars, and cafes. But health experts are warning that the nation is on the brink of losing control over the renewed coronavirus outbreak. Tracy Alexander reports.
Israel's economic gamble losing big. The government coronavirus cabinet meeting today again weighing reimposing some restrictions. New infections in the country continuing to rise. Deputy Health Minister Yoav Kish telling Israeli News that the steps taken today prevent a lockdown tomorrow. The Health Ministry reporting a rise of some 621 cases in just 24 hours. It's yet another record, bringing the total national tally of active cases to more than 6,100, the death toll rising to 318. One of those, Israel's now youngest coronavirus victim, a 19-year-old woman who reportedly had even been treated with a passive vaccine. But she apparently suffered from obesity and high blood pressure, among other conditions, requiring ventilation nearly as soon as she was admitted. So what are some of the new restrictions on the decision block today? Well, the Health Ministry is pushing to limit summer youth programs, to limit the number of people on beaches, and to limit social gatherings to just 20 to 30 people, as well as reducing the number at weddings to 150, down from 250. The ministry also wants to force educational institutions and workplaces to create capsules or separated groups of employees that always work together and never mix. But despite recommendations from the Deputy Health Minister, it's not solely up to him. And some ministers are already saying that while they'll back the proposals in the name of health, they'll do anything to prevent mass closures of businesses. Meantime, taking a step back from earlier hopes, Israeli travellers planning trips abroad are in for some disappointment. As EU member states and the UK partially open their borders, Israel's slowly rising infection numbers leaving it off the list of countries allowed in.
Meanwhile, anger's still foaming against the Knesset Finance Committee over its approval of retroactive tax benefits for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, especially as the country's reeling from financial hardships due to the coronavirus pandemic. Perhaps taking the hint then, the committee has also now postponed talks regarding benefits for alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz. Gantz's Blue and White Party saying that it would be inappropriate amidst surging virus infections and rising risk of economic collapse. Now, the controversial benefits approved last week for Netanyahu are worth an estimated 1 million shekels, or some $270,000. They cover the cost of income tax that the premier owes from upgrades to his vehicle and personal income in Syria, as well as other expenses dating back over a decade. It could even relieve him of taxation on profits that he made from stock trading and other private ventures, though the Likud claims that Netanyahu would only seek reimbursement for expenses related to his office. Now, over the past decade, Israel has become known as a powerhouse for innovations, helping to improve people's everyday lives. And today, Israel's innovators are focusing their efforts where they're needed most, attempting to tackle the threat of COVID-19. Well, a new book called Tikkun Olam, or Healing the World, shows how citizens of the startup nation are adapting. And here to tell us more about the new book is author Jody Cohen. Jody, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to be talking about this book. I wish it was on maybe a more positive subject.
Absolutely.
But, okay, many companies around the world are trying to find solutions, though, to this problem. What makes Israeli solutions maybe so unique?
So I think what's unique to Israeli society is, as a society, we're used to being agile. We're used to being in a permanent state of defense. Things come up that's unexpected and we have to suddenly react as a society. So in terms of the Israeli innovation and the startup world, what I've seen from researching this book is that they have really addressed this in the same way. Every startup has really looked inward and thought, what can we use our technology for? How can we pivot our technology to try and do something to help tackle the pandemic? And I think particularly as we're seeing numbers rise around the world and we're seeing some countries already in a second wave, some countries heading towards a second wave, the book is important because it really gives cause for optimism. It really does show just how much work is being done across Israel in all different areas, whether it's trying to prevent spread or through testing or through caring for patients or the crucial search for treatments and vaccines.
All right, now what brought you towards this book in particular?
Well, I was in lockdown, as everybody else was, not really knowing what day it was. And I had the idea for this book. I mean, part of my work is writing for pharmaceutical companies, medtech companies, and healthcare innovation companies. So it's not unusual to my work. I was actually talking to my 13-year-old son, And he was talking about how, unfortunately, when bad things happen in the world, very often people blame Israel and the Jewish people. And we're seeing that, unfortunately, especially on social media. And when he said that to me, I thought, okay, I have to do something. And I think this story is really important, especially in the context of anti-Semitism, because education is crucial. This book basically highlights 30 case studies across all different areas of what Israel's doing to try and tackle the coronavirus. We don't know if these, or I should say, I wouldn't say if, we don't know which solutions will succeed. A lot of them, they're in trials in major hospitals. They're going through trials as we speak. But it's a very positive sign that so much is being done.
All right, well, so now you said there's like 30-something case studies in here. What's one of your favorites?
There are actually, that's a really hard question. Can I sneak in two?
You can, I'll allow it.
Okay, so let's have a look at treatment and vaccines. So very, very quickly, on the treatment front, there's a company called Pluristem, and I love this idea because they take the placenta, which, as we know, gives life to babies, and they take cells from the placenta and they use it to treat people who have a number of conditions, and they've already been working on that for a number of years. But they are now looking at how these placenta cells can help people who are at severe risk of dying from coronavirus. And they've just announced a 28-day follow-up study on patients who were almost dying from coronavirus, and 87% of them are still alive. So I think that's showing amazing promise. Wow. And the other one is MigVax. They were researching for a number of years the coronavirus in the context of poultry. And when the genetic sequence of the human coronavirus was announced, they realized it's almost identical. So now they're doing trials looking into that. Eventually, they're not at the stage of human testing yet, but the hope is that that will be an oral vaccine, which will help protect people from the coronavirus. And I would also say that for people to get updates, this is a story of the opening chapter, if you like, of Israel's fight against the coronavirus. But if people want updates, they should go to tikkunolamIsrael.com, and I'll be updating on the innovations that are featured in the book and also other innovations that we hear of as days pass.
All right, well, Tikkun Olam, Israel versus COVID-19 by Jody Cohen. Thank you so much for coming. If you want to get a copy of this book, check it out on Amazon. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
And moving north, yet another set of explosions blamed on Israel have been reported in neighboring Syria over the weekend.
6 pro-Iranian fighters, including 4 Syrian nationals, have been killed late Saturday in alleged Israeli airstrikes in Syria. This makes for the 4th suspected Israeli attack in Syria over the past month. 2 attacks reported just last week, with earlier targets including an onion factory and a cattle feed facility. They were allegedly being used as weapons storehouses by Iranian and pro-Iranian military forces. The IDF, as per usual, has not commented on the allegations, though Israel has confirmed hundreds of similar strikes committed over the past few years. Israel repeatedly warning Iran and its proxies, like terror group Hezbollah, that it will strike against any threat to its sovereignty.
Returning to Israel now, the annual Jerusalem Pride March seeing opposition again, with far-right activist Moshe Ben Zikri being arrested Sunday morning in his home. Ben Zikri, making clear his intent to protest the rally, scheduled for today, has protested previous Pride events as well, even coming one year disguised as a member of the LGBTQ community. Police, fearing an incident, took him into custody in a preventative arrest. Now, we all love a good story, and the film Picture of His Life is exactly that and more. It follows famous photographer Amos Nahum on a mission for the ages to capture a close-up shot of a polar bear mid-swim while swimming right along with it, something that's actually never been done before. But of course, the story takes a ton of twists and turns along the way too, with the journey captured by veteran Israeli filmmakers Yonatan Nir and Danny Menken. Take a look.
Amos, to me, is one of the best ambassadors of the ocean. It takes huge amount of risks to bring those images which nobody else has ever been able to capture.
All right, and now Israeli Academy Award-winning director Danny Menken joins us with more about this incredible film. Danny, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what was so unique about Amos that drew you into him and his journey?
For us, Jonathan and I, we were just amazed by the fact that somebody with a clear conscience is going to shoot the polar bear underwater. And we wanted to know who's the man behind the image. So we wanted to capture not only his journey towards the picture of his life, but also we wanted to know a little bit more about him. So we called it Picture of His Life. And we joined forces with Nancy Spielberg, executive producer, and other wonderful people. And we went all the way to the Arctic, and we lived with bears and tried to take the picture for a long time.
Wow. All right. Now, in some of your previous projects, you followed really amazing Israeli characters, like we saw Dolphin Poi and Shimon Peres and the players from the Israeli basketball team, Maccabi Tel Aviv. But can a non-Israeli audience connect with these characters despite the differences in language and culture?
Absolutely. I mean, what I'm doing is bringing good, positive stories out of Israel. So we have a foundation called On the Map Foundation, which is following the story of On the Map. And people are fascinated by it. On the map, everybody were saying, we knew about the miracle on ice, but we never heard about the miracle on hardwood. And same for Dolphin Boy. People never heard about such an amazing coexistence between Jews and Arabs, and the story of Olsi, an African-American that's coming to glory in the Holy Land. And that's part of what I'm trying to bring, wonderful stories that some of them I grew up on in Israel, and the American audience are excited and fascinated by it. So it's fun for me to bring some of my childhood to the U.S.
All right. Well, speaking of, bringing your history and your childhood to other audiences, the cinema's been closed in recent months because of coronavirus. So how did you manage to distribute this film at a time when it couldn't be done in traditional ways?
Yeah, so all festivals have shut down, and we were thinking of doing a normal theatrical release, and that's, of course, impossible. So we have decided with Picture of His Life to go virtual. So everyone can see it all over the world. They just need to go to pictureofhislife.com. This is our website, and pay $10 or as much as they want and gather everyone. The movie is for the entire family. We got incredible reviews by Hollywood Reporter, CNN, New York Times, and we want everyone to enjoy it. So yes, everybody can see it at their own home, and they can book meetings with us, Q&A, etc. So we are coming to you guys. Like we say, if the mountain doesn't come to Muhammad, Muhammad comes to the mountain. Or it's the opposite, I think. But that's what we're trying to do with the movie.
All right. Danny, I want to thank you so much for joining us again. It looks like an incredible film, an amazing journey that I cannot wait to see. I want to see if he actually got that final photo, as I'm sure other people watching this right now want to know. So, of course, again, check it out at pictureofhislife.com. Danny, thank you again.
Peace. Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight, you can expect a nice warm low of about 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow should be comfortable again with partly cloudy skies and highs averaging 89 Fahrenheit or 31 degrees Celsius. And now before we go, of course, let's take a look at what is going viral in Israel. Wow, that is an angry wife. I'm happy to say that my wife is not like that when I get home from work. That would be not fun. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.43 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.